Hey, Ken Stringfellow, how you doing, buddy?
That is a huge question in 2020.
Yeah, no shit, right? Yeah. So,
But all things considered, I'm hanging in there.
yeah, I'm actually having to record out of my bedroom. So,
Mhm.
yeah. Welcome to 2020, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cool, cool. So, let's get a couple of questions out of the way. Um, most artists don't like to talk about the first albums, but Failure is one of my favorites. So,
Mm-hmm.
why don't
I
we
have no
talk about
qualms
that?
with talking about it. I see it for what it is.
Yeah, it's perfect power pop, right? So I saw
That's
your
not for me to judge.
right. So I saw your what was it 2018? I guess it was the 25th anniversary. When was that?
A 30th
Oh,
anniversary.
30th anniversary. Yeah, that's
Yeah, in
right.
2018 we did the 30th anniversary tour with the Frosting on the Beater lineup. Myself, John Auer, Dave Fox on bass, and Mike Musburger on drums.
Oh no, I'm talking about the acoustic show that you and John did at Triple Door.
Oh yeah, we also did. Well, we do those pretty regularly. I think we did one in 2018. Did we? Did we? Yeah, I guess we did, because we did that and the Kirkland Performance Center.
That's right.
But we also put the Triple Door in 2014 when the reissue of Failure came out. So
Yeah, that's the one I'm talking
points
about.
on the way.
Yeah, that was it. That was it. So it was funny, like when you were doing Believe in Something Other, and you hit the line about being 22, and you just stopped, and you're like, Jesus fucking Christ. You're like,
it is what it is.
You're like, yeah, that was 30 years ago, man. It's crazy shit. So you've been extraordinarily busy. You've done stuff in Senegal and all throughout Europe and whatever. So how do you do that all the time? Like you're always on the move. You're always somewhere different.
You should do it. Obviously, it's a little different this year, but in general, I don't know. Just I think since the band went through its initial breakup in 1998, where I was forced to diversify my whole shtick. Sorry, just moving this here real quick.
No.
I just was decided that I would always pursue all my interests and kind of dictate my own schedule, etc. Of course, that gets taken over by certain projects at certain times. If I will commit to a tour, I spend a lot of time with REM, etc. But generally, I just kind of do whatever interests me, and I'm interested in a lot of things, so it's okay to keep moving in that sense.
So when's the last
I
time
do a lot of things, but I'm just also very efficient. So I should also mention that there's also lots of times where I'm not moving. It's just nobody sees those.
Cool. When was the last time you had a real job? I'm sorry, not that this isn't a real job. You know what I mean? Like you had to have a show up and do work.
Right, work for somebody else.
Exactly.
Yeah, 1989.
Good for you, man. Good for you. Cool. So you were what, 19, 20 when Failure came out?
When it was released, I was still 19. Yeah,
That's so
I turned 20 later in the year.
That's awesome. That following year, I actually had you guys play at a beach party for Edmonds High School.
Yeah,
that was a lot of fun. It was actually a lot of fun because I had just seen you open for the Replacements. I think like the week before or 2 weeks. It was really close to there. So that was kind of crazy. And then the next thing I knew, I was at Shoreline. I went to Evergreen for exactly one day and decided totally was not for me. Like literally showed up, unpacked my stuff, had a day, packed all my shit back in my truck and came back to Seattle. So I ended up going to Shoreline and I met this kid there. Weird little kid, he'd sit outside and smoke and we'd smoke together and whatnot. And he's like, oh yeah, John Auer's my brother.
Oh, funny.
And I just thought he was, like, I don't know. And it turns out, yeah, it was Nathan. And that was right before Dear 23 came out. And I still thought he was full of shit, right? And then one day we were out smoking and he's like, yeah, John just called me and like, he said, we're in a limo in LA, And anyway, so I thought that was really funny. But yeah, those two albums especially were really, really important for me, growing up. And I think it was, I mean, obviously it was the first introduction to the Posies for people in Seattle, and you guys didn't quite fit in, right? Like the power.
Yeah, I mean, we came from a different place. We were, first of all, we were quite a bit younger than the bands that we all know and love. I mean, by 2 or 3 years, but at that age, it makes a difference. We were just out of high school, basically. And we came from Bellingham. We didn't grow up in Seattle. And even though, like Kurt Cobain came from Aberdeen, so he's not from Seattle and blah, 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 blah. Just Bellingham is just a little, it's close enough to know some things, but far enough to not know everything. And so you have a special brand of pre-internet naivete that you can acquire by growing up in Bellingham.
Sure, of
It's a very
course.
safe place.
Yeah.
But it's not the big city.
Yeah, you were UW at the time, right?
What was that?
Were you at UW at the time?
Yes, I left Bellingham to attend the University of Washington. I graduated high school in 1986. I was already playing in bands and doing things with John in high school. But, I'm a year older, so I graduated in 86. He was still in high school until 87. And then he attended Western in Bellingham for a year, part of a year. I mean, really, because by that time our record started to take off, and then he was like, "Screw this, I'm going to Seattle."
Yeah, I think I bought that at the cassette at what's the name of the store in the U District, Sullivan Square.
At Cellophane.
Yeah. It's funny, and it kind of came out of nowhere, and suddenly it was like, I forget. I think it was like number 2 or 3 when I first bought it, and I just bought it basically.
And basically that's just a fluke of one that boils down to one thing. It's basically that we dropped copies off here and there, and we consigned them at Cellophane with Scott McCoy, who was working there at the time. And of course, he reviewed it in the Rocket, and that helped. But what really made it go viral was that it was added into rotation straight away without anybody working it. And like, we were just kids with cassettes in our backpacks. I mean, there was no promo, Mad Men, Hitmen, whatever going on. We got added to KJet, and that's a commercial station. And once you get added to commercial radio, all kinds of interesting things happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So you released Failure, and then shortly thereafter, how did you meet Roderick? How did the whole Sky Crow's Mary thing happen? The first Sky Crow's Mary album.
Yeah, well, I knew Roderick before. I met Roderick when I was at UW. I took a drama class and just check it out, and the tasks assigned to us, drama 101 people, were basically to assist directors and in other aspects, whatever's interesting to you in the theatrical production. So I was the kind of script supervisor or whatever, like just basically making sure that everybody's got their lines and all this kind of stuff for a small play. Basically helping the director keep everybody on task and make sure that if anybody gets stuck on a line, like I would be following along. And of course, what was cool is I memorized the play, 3-act play, like that weekend. So I knew it by heart, which impressed the director. But Roderick was one of the actors. He was a couple years older, so he was well into the theater department.
That's cool.
So and he and I just hit it off. He was into the same, not the same, but into some of the music I was into, and he was into some things that even I didn't know about. And he was interested in doing a kind of performance art piece. And I'd mentioned I play a little music, and he wanted some help on the musical end of that. So we started working together on that, and I got John involved. And we did like this elaborate, very typical of the era performance art piece with, just anti-war, anti-everything kind of thing. And we all just, we became pals. And actually, John offered to do a whole record. But there's actually a cassette pre-Sky Cries Mary. It's called Grinder Cease, which is what became the, kind of morphed into the title of the Sky Cries Mary album. But there's actually a cassette thing of stuff that Roderick and I did just like on 4 tracks and stuff like that.
Oh, cool.
That would be pretty hard to find now.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But then John offered, kind of as I guess like a birthday present to Roderick, to go up and record at the studio in Bellingham that John had in his dad's house.
That's awesome.
That's where we did Failure.
Mm-hmm.
And so we did this record, and it's really creative, cool, experimental project that kind of incorporated some things that, like John was a really good drum machine and sequence programmer in those days of standalone drum machines and standalone sequencers. He had a real knack for that, and of course the Posies didn't have any need for that talent, so it was fun for him to use those skills.
It's awesome.
We also did some organic stuff, with me playing bass and John playing drums. So the record, the Sky Crazy Mary record, is kind of a mix of those two things. So Roderick had gone to clown school.
That's right.
Just like David Bowie in Paris. And while being over there, he'd made some contacts, and he made a contact with a label and stayed in touch with them. And so they put out that record. So that record initially only came out in France.
Yeah, it took me like 3 years to find the original Lively Art pressing of that.
Yeah.
And I still have, it's too far away, but I was going to grab it. The pictures on the back are hysterical because it's like, there's John, he's trying to look tough, and Roderick kind of like, gothic and whatever, and Ken, you're just smiling. You get the big smile on your face, like, hi.
Sort of irrepressible that way. not really a goth, as it turns out.
It was awesome. So you also did Donate the Dirt, right?
Yes.
Okay.
We did a follow-up EP with that cover of Spanish Castle Magic.
Yep. And that was...
I think there's some stuff on that EP that we didn't do. I think it's a mix of a few things, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, but Steve Fisk did a couple of remixes too, right?
Yeah. And so around this time, we played live shows as well, as a 3-piece, just bass, drums, and Roderick.
Yeah, I saw one of the...
Cool. We did a gig opening for Para Ubu at the Moor.
I saw that.
And we did Bumbershoot.
And I saw a show...
maybe that's it.
Yeah, it might have been post you and John leaving, but there were a bunch of shows. Like there was a little art space in the Market that I saw Roderick a couple of times do shows. It would have been like...
Yeah, I don't think that was us.
Yeah, 90, 91, somewhere in there. But, all right, so, you did all this stuff, and then obviously your influences are like Big Star is a big influence, and you obviously turned a lot of people onto Big Star with, covers and just mentioning them in the press and whatnot. But what was it like
in every set?
Yeah, exactly. So what was it like in, what was it, 92 when you got approached by Big Star? Like, what was that like?
We get it's not quite that. First of all, I was in 93, but
okay.
Essentially there was... Okay, so Jody Stevens works at Arden Studios, the place where Big Star made all their records, and the label that made those records, Arden Records, was based. It was all John Fry, basically, who was a young recording engineer and businessman, and just a cool guy, knew a lot of things. Started a studio in his garage, and his early business partner was Fred Smith, because they went to high school together. Fred Smith, who started FedEx. Anyway, that studio moved into a real space, became a real studio, blah, 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 blah. And the rest, as they say, is history. So the Big Star records were made there, and Big Star was comprised of young people who were hanging out at that studio and into rock and roll. The primary clientele of Arden Studios was soul music, because that was what was going on in Memphis at that time, and there's so much great soul music being made. But some Anglophile rockers made these beautiful records, blah, blah, blah. They're my favorite records of all time, so what can I say? But, Jody was in the band, and eventually, when the band didn't go as far as everybody hoped and didn't last, Jody just stayed on working at the studio from the 70s until today.
Does he still work there?
John Fry, the proprietor, has passed away, but yeah, Jody is the studio manager.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and basically runs the production company, whatever it is. That basically like overseeing the legacy and catalog of the production company. Um, so anyway, like Jody's the guy that not answers the phone, but handles the professional correspondence. So
Mm-hmm.
when we looked into working there at one point in 1990, he's the guy that signed the letter that accompanied the brochure that they sent us, and we were absolutely flabbergasted to discover that
I can imagine.
the guy from Big Star, works at the studio. So that was not expected. But we didn't end up working there, but we stayed in touch, and Jody became a fan and supporter of ours. So that put us on the path to being on the radar of whomever might be involved in Big Star in the future. Though in 1990, 1991, there was no future.
Mm.
Alex Chilton had spent years sort of making it quite clear he was fairly disdainful of that period of his music. He didn't think it was as good. He didn't think it was that good. He didn't see what the big fuss was all about. Chris Bell, the other songwriter, had not only quit the band back in the day, but by that time had long been dead.
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't ever seem like Big Star would ever be a thing again. Once they stopped playing in 1974. But people made inquiries now and then because the records, stayed, actually grew in kind of reputation over the years. This acquired, legendary status, one of those unicorn records, that you just can't believe when you hear it that it's not the biggest thing ever, because it's very pop, but it's also very intelligent. It's sophisticated, but also very relatable. It's kind of hits all the marks, and the songs are just wonderful and beautifully produced.
It's almost like a nursery rhyme.
Diamond.
Yeah, it's almost like a nursery rhyme in a lot of ways. Like especially like 13, songs like that are just like very.
Yeah, there's a purity to it.
Yeah.
So it was definitely musically it should have been a contender, but it just there were some bad business deals made and bad luck, and it just didn't get to where it needed to go.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, sometimes great records don't sell.
No, they don't.
Just happens. They just don't connect to the wider imagination for whatever reason. So anyway, people would call up because Jody was findable. They'd ring him up from time to time and kind of inquire about putting Big Star back together if they'd be interested. Big Star is really legendary in the UK. I mean, like every single music fan loves Big Star. They're at the same kind of vibe as the Velvet Underground for pretty much every British music fan. And Jody would do due diligence and call up Alex, and Alex would say not interested, and that would be that. They'd been used to that game for 10, 15 years. These kids at a radio station, college radio station in Columbia, Missouri, KCOU, did the same thing. They thought it'd be so cool to have Big Star play at our spring concert.
That's awesome.
They looked up Jody. Jody, they said, would it be possible? Jody said, I'm going to ask Alex, but that means no, but I'll do it. He rang up Alex. Alex said, yeah, sure, why not? All of a sudden. So that led to panic, because how is this going to work? There's two guys left in the band. Andy Hummel, the original bass player, had long dropped out of music and wasn't really interested in getting back into it. And in fact, he really couldn't. He had a serious job in aeronautics. So they started trying to brainstorm. When I say they, I mean Mike and Jeff, Mike Mulvaney and Jeff Breeze, who sadly passed away last week. The DJs from KCOU started thinking, well, how do we, this is a big deal. We got to support this and make it a real event. So let's get, some known Big Star fans involved. So of course, Paul Westerberg came to mind, Matthew Sweet, Mike Mills from REM. All these people were actually asked, and all of them said no for various reasons. The most common reason being, I do not want to be the guy who destroyed the reunion of the greatest band of all time.
Definitely.
That was basically Westerberg's response. and Matthew Sweet's response and Evan Dando's response. They're like, "There's no way I'm going to destroy that legacy by my incompetence." And they, Jody had suggested us, as a possibility, but people we weren't really that big of a name. I mean, we were on a major label, we had a record out,
Mm-hmm.
but we weren't like at the level of like a Paul Westerberg or whatever. But as people started dropping out, we started gaining a little traction, and I basically did a little lobbying on our behalf, sort of buttonholing Jeff Breeze at South by Southwest that year, which is kind of amazing to me because that was in March and the show was in April.
Wow.
So it still wasn't decided in March, like what was going to be happening.
But then again,
like, you have to let us do this.
Right. Then again,
We're the guys.
you're like 22, 23 at the time. So you're like, fuck it, I'll do whatever, I can do anything. Right.
Well, it's not a question for me. It's more a question for their own organization that 1 month before the show, they didn't have a band.
Oh, true.
I mean, for me, I don't give a shit. If you told me tomorrow to play with them, I'd do it. But it's more about like just that it was still open. It was anybody's game, a month before the show. Anyway, so I think I made a pretty convincing argument, and Jody was really gunning for us, thinking that that John and I, as a unit, would really enhance the thing, especially because of the vocal harmonies, which we do have that specialty, which is kind of unique. In your alternative rock bands, not a lot of them are that harmony laden. There are some, but that wasn't the rule, especially at that time. So we got the gig, which was, how to describe, playing the first and what was supposed to be the only reunion show of this mythical band that happens to be your favorite band, and you're playing in it. I don't really know if there's an analogous situation.
No.
It's so weird and so wonderful and so improbable, like so many things in my life, that I don't have really a context for it. It's just an amazing opportunity.
So how well did you sleep the night before? Actually, hold on, let's back up. How long did you guys have to rehearse before the show?
Well, years, because we've listened to these records so many times that we
I
knew
meant
them already.
I meant with the two members. Like, I mean, like, did you guys?
Yeah. Well, that basically a couple weeks out. Now we'd met Jody, but we'd never met Alex. Alex was known to be a little bit reclusive and just kind of, he didn't play that much. He just kind of chilled and did his thing, and down in New Orleans, and did the occasional Box Tops reunion and solo gigs. He was like really low key, but also just not in the game. So we'd never met him, and we'd met Jody, of course. And Jody's very affable and very friendly and really easy to get to know. He's a really nice person and very open. So that put us a little bit at ease. Jody's not an intimidating character. He's very warm. Anyway, we once word of this show got around, Bud Scappa, who had written the original review of one of Big Star's albums in Rolling Stone back in the 70s, was now running a label, an imprint inside BMG, and they had the success of Matthew Sweet to sort of justify their projects. So Bud reached out and said, "Hey, I'd like to record this and release it." We thought, that's cool. So we had a little bit of money in advance for that, which allowed us to fund rehearsing. Otherwise, we would really have had no money. I'm not sure how well that Columbia, Missouri gig paid, but we certainly weren't going to get the money in advance. So we got a little cash so we could, Jody and Alex could fly out to Seattle and we could rehearse. And Jim Rondinelli, who recorded the live album, who now lives here in Seattle, amazingly enough, came out and recorded the rehearsals and kind of got things, we got the team to getting familiar with itself. So that was the first day we met Alex. We rehearsed, for 2 days, which was fine, to get a set together, considering that we knew the material real well. And, Jody's great. He'd been woodshedding on his own, just playing with headphones and getting into shape and everything. And Alex, he was right there. So it was a natural fit.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I'm just trying to imagine this. Like, you're basically talking about every teenage boy's wet dream right there, right? So suddenly you're like
It would
playing
probably
on.
be Zeppelin or something, but
Well, okay. Well,
I see where you're going.
a wet dream. How's that? Maybe not the big one, but a one. Um, so you finish that whole thing, and you're done. The show is over, and I imagine it was probably relatively small, right? The show,
Yeah,
yeah.
a couple thousand people.
Oh well, I mean that's not small.
And for Columbia, Missouri, that's a big day.
That's the entire
That's
town,
basically you could probably rob the bank that day.
right?
There's nobody left.
So
But I should also mention that this is the exact same. I mean, that show was like on a Sunday, and Frosting on the Beater was released that Tuesday because records used to come out on Tuesdays.
oh, that's right.
And so we'd have the release show for the press, like a private show for press and radio and stuff like that in Seattle on the Friday night. Flew in a plane after the show to Columbia, Missouri. I guarantee it was not a direct flight.
Mm-hmm.
And rehearsed one more time without Alex, and then did the show the next day during the day. So it was a pretty intense week.
Wow, that's great, man.
A lot going on.
And in between all that time, you had something that I'm ashamed I didn't even know happened until a couple of years ago. You had Ringo Starr cover Golden Blunders. Like, how did that happen?
Oh yeah, true. That was the year before.
I didn't even know about that honestly until like I think 2 years ago, and I was like,
Yeah,
what the fuck is this?
Again, my whole life story is just one improbable thing after another.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like a hoax.
Yeah.
Like my whole life is basically a hoax. If I tried to convince people that this was my life, that it actually wasn't true, I mean, it would sound like a very delusional person indeed.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yes, you just joined all your favorite bands. Oh yeah, and then one of the Beatles covered one of your songs. Sure.
And we're only getting started here too. Like there's a lot more to go.
Yeah, so basically how that came about, of course the song is Golden Blunders, which is already like a play on words on a Beatles title.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of echoes some of the refrain. There's like a hint of some of the lines from Carry That Weight, that big chorus that Ringo sings on Abbey Road. So it kind of had some Ringo in it already. Basically, it was a single, so it was on the radio and things like that. And Peter Asher, record producer, manager, and artist, he's part of the Peter and Gordon duo during the 60s, and from Swinging London, and had a lot to do with the career of Linda Ronstadt, among others. So he was like a player. He was down, I think, somewhere in the Deep South, on a musical mission of some kind, and he heard Golden Blunders on the radio, and he like pulled over, and he said, God, like, he's like, that's such kind of a cheeky thing to do, to play with like a Beatles title, but it's a really good song. So he researched what it was and found out, got the lyrics and all that kind of stuff. And as it happens, he was called in to produce this Ringo album. And he was like, you know what? I actually think Ringo should do this song.
That's incredible.
And he played it for Ringo, and Ringo's like, yeah, that's cheeky. I get it. And then Peter handed him the lyrics and just said, just check out the story here. And Ringo's like, that's really deep. It's quite, it's going, these are kids, I assume, and they're writing about this relationship stuff. It's pretty heavy. It's like, I got to give that props up. It's a really good song.
It's great.
So yeah, they did a version. We had no idea.
Yeah. Did you ever meet Ringo?
You can record a cover version of whoever you want.
Of course.
People sometimes can we cover one of your? I'm like, if you can do whatever you want. We can't stop you. You'll just make us money.
Right. Exactly.
So whatever. But yeah. So it was a big surprise.
Yeah.
Really neat one. But yeah, we met Ringo because we were down in LA, and we went to the record release show. And that was well, he still does it. He still does the all-star band, Star of 2 Hours. where he puts together a band of notable musicians, and they do, Beatles and Ringo stuff, but they also have their little moment to do stuff from their career. And there's been all kinds of people in the All-Star Band. But that year, there was Burton Cummings was in it, and Todd Rundgren,
Mm.
Dr. John was in it. So that was pretty cool. We didn't really meet Todd, but the record release, I remember talking to Burton Cummings, and I'm a really big fan of the Guess Who, so that was quite a delight. He was very charming and had lots of good stories, and really nice guy. And of course, Ringo is Ringo. I mean, it's just like it's like meeting a Muppet. It's like your favorite childhood personality is there talking to you.
Yeah.
So, and he's like that. I mean, he's a character. He's very warm, very funny. He's just a good, solid dude. Very nice person, and he's just ludicrously famous. So it's just hard not to get a little excited about the whole thing because of all the things, those songs and his voice and everything meant to you and means to everybody else. It just kind of, and he's very relaxed. He puts you right at ease. He's one of those.
Yeah.
And maybe that's just a drummer thing.
Maybe. I mean, when I think of Ringo, I think of somebody who's like, he is ludicrously famous, but also somebody who could probably walk down the street, and if he wasn't wearing those glasses, probably people wouldn't know who the hell he was, right?
So it's like, sure I'm going to go with you on that one.
Well, it depends on where he is, of course.
I think they'd figure it out.
Well, probably eventually. He has that
because he's always doing this.
Yeah, that's right.
Also, he's always got the peace and love.
And he's got that
out eventually.
He's got that accent that's just like, okay. Especially in America, we don't hear that very often, right? So it's like, oh yeah, no, I know who that is, right?
Prodigious hooter, as they say in whatever they say in Hard Day's Night.
Exactly. So that's actually.
But yeah, so I actually got to sing with Ringo, which is even cooler.
Really?
Well, first of all, we opened for Ringo when that tour came to Seattle. They played at the Gorge, and we opened the show, and that was fun. And then a couple years later, just by coincidence, a friend of mine became his personal assistant.
Oh, wow.
And so when the All-Star Band that year was coming back to Seattle, they were playing Summer Nights at the Pier. Ruth Ann said, hey, you should really come, and I think you should sing with Ringo. I'm like, sure, yeah. I should also like carry the torch at the Olympics. I should do a lot of things, but you have to be invited to do those things. I like when fans always ask me, like, why don't you guys play like the main stage at Glastonbury? That'd be really good for you guys. Be like, yeah, sure, but it doesn't really work like that.
Right.
I mean, great idea. It never occurred to me to go play on the main stage at Glastonbury. I should look into that. That'd be a really helpful thing for my career.
And we should sell out 5 nights at Hammersmith. Like, why not?
Yeah, just whatever. Anyway, so I was like, I'm not. I mean, Ringo doesn't. I mean, he's got some people in his band that are pretty good. So she's like, no, like I'm gonna talk to him. I'm sure he'll be into it. I'm like, whatever. So anyway, that day of the show, she's like, okay, you're in. And I'm like,
wow.
She's like, just come to the show. We'll figure it out.
So you have like 2 hours of notice or whatever it is, right? And you're like, really?
Well, the afternoon, but I don't know what it is yet.
Right.
So I get down to the show, and I re-meet Ringo, and of course he's very complimentary. I love the song. It's a great song. You guys are very talented.
I love it.
And Barbara, his wife, who's really super nice. So we're chatting back there, and he said, well, I hope you'll come and sing with us tonight, Ken. And I was like, yeah, sure. Like, what are we doing? He's like, you'll know. And so off he goes and plays the show.
Terrifying.
So, okay. So after a certain point in the show, they're getting towards a kind of a finale, as it were. And Ringo said, well, we'd like to bring out one of your hometown great musicians from here in Seattle. Please welcome to the stage, Ken Stringfellow.
Oh, my God.
And so I start to go up the ramp. And so there's, security. You see this like 20-something in black flag T-shirt, not looking like the classic rock musicians in the All-Star Band. And the security just dives on me. And, Barbara runs up there and she's beating on them with her tiny fists. And like, no, he's supposed to be up there, you idiots. And Ringo's like, come on now, don't keep us waiting. It's like, the source of every anxiety of nightmare I've ever had. It's like, stage is there and you can't get to it somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly you have no bass amp. You got to go build one. Anyway, security lets me go, and I get up there, and Ringo puts me on the mic with Randy Bachman. I got John Otwhistle playing bass over there to my left.
Wow.
Got Billy Preston playing keys. It's kind of like serious. And what was the song? Well, it was With a Little Help from My Friends. And you're damn right, I knew it.
That's perfect.
And I got to sing the Could It Be Anybody?
Oh, that's awesome.
With Randy. We're sharing a mic, you know. It was fucking awesome. I mean, what can I say? It was just incredible.
Just imagine, though, if you...
And then I got to party with John Otwhistle.
Oh, that's awesome.
Which is taking it to another level.
Just imagine.
Ringo, of course, has been sober for years, and he also, you know, is of the means that he just flies home every night after the show. He goes back to LA.
Sure.
But the band stays on, and so they're staying at the West End, and you know, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna party with John Otwhistle, and he was going for it. It was like good times, and he was great. Awesome. He's like just full of great stories and whatnot as well, and very affable.
Mm-hmm.
And just sucking down the cocktails and flirting with the stewardesses, sorry, as the West End is where some flight crews stay. So
mm-hmm.
Taking well advantage of the situation. I don't wish to speak ill of the deceased.
No, of course not.
But he was just in the moment. Let's just say he was in the moment. And he's like, I was talking to him, asking him some questions. He's like, oh, you guys speak up. I'm a bit mutton. You know, like talking about slang, Mutton Jeff, Def.
Mm-hmm. So just imagine, though, if he had called you up on stage and it was a song you didn't know. Like he picked like something deep in the catalog, just Ken Stringfellow, and you're like, uh-huh.
You have to go pretty deep in the catalog.
But see, that's what would happen to me, right? Like, I mean, if I were ever be in that sort of situation, to be like, it's a song called XYZ we recorded in 1935, right? And I'm like, oh, okay, great. So.
Well, yeah, well. Depends on what you're listening to, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So, actually,
we're gonna do side 2 of Tales from Topographic Oceans.
Exactly.
Here's the sitar.
That was my first concert, by the way. I saw Yes and Kansas. I think it was like Tales of Topographic. I was like 7 or something. My parents dragged me to it. I forget, something like that.
I saw Yes at the Sky Church.
Really?
Yeah, in like 2001, somewhere around there. It was fucking amazing because they'd spent the week rehearsing at Paul Allen's house.
And that's right. What's his name?
They did a show at the Sky Church. I mean, for like 800 people.
Yeah, that's right. Because
unbelievable.
What's his name? Alan White, right?
Yeah, Alan White lives here.
Yeah, he lives here. So yeah. All right. So here's a nice little segue because I don't want to go down the Yes pathway.
Okay.
So
we'll just say no then.
Exactly, no. So you've been primarily in France for the last 20 years, off and on, 20ish.
17.
17. Okay, cool. So let's segue into something a little bit different. So you were obviously there during the.
Yes, I do have Grey Poupon.
Yeah, awesome, perfect. You were obviously there during the start of the whole COVID nightmare and whatnot. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was actually here, but.
Oh, okay.
Depending on what you consider the start.
Well, I call it like February because
you want a piece of my heart. You better start from the start.
There you go, man. There you go. So, let's figure like early February basically is when it all kind of really started to kick, and I think we started to take it seriously the middle of March here, right? For the most part,
Seattle did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was on tour here. Basically, early February, I was on tour in Italy and Spain.
Mm-hmm.
And so that shows you that even there it wasn't interfering with events yet. And of course, Italy and Spain per capita are among the hardest hit countries.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, we were still doing shows in both places. And then I went to LA for 2 weeks to work on the Posies album. And then I went back home. And then at the end of February, I came back to do another tour, a continuation of my solo tour that I did last year, where I was playing my 2001 album Touched, basically, and other things too, but it's based around me playing that album. And so I was coming to do some music production with Ren Allen, who I'd done an album with before.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were based at a studio in Southeast Ohio, in Athens, Ohio. And to sweeten the deal, she kind of booked some shows in the region, so could bring in a little bank,
Mm-hmm.
and I could be worth coming all that way to do 3 days of music production. I'd build a tour around it. And so I also added some dates. I did this date in DC, and I did one in Minneapolis, and Chicago, and some dates in Texas. And I had a New Orleans date, and then I was going to go to South by Southwest.
Right.
So that was the idea. And actually, strangely enough, nearly all of it happened. Obviously, South by Southwest didn't.
Right.
And my New Orleans show didn't.
Mm-hmm.
But that's it.
But I saw you
Everything else happened.
You ended up doing a show from a friend's living room in New Orleans, though, right?
Yeah, well, so I went later on that venue because it was time to go home. Like that show was going to be March 17th, and they couldn't open, and there's just no point. I mean, it was just like, let's. I'm going to go home now, and I can still travel. So I went home on the 16th and got home on the 17th, and that's when the borders closed, etc.
Oh, you got lucky.
But later I got really lucky, considering I had no passport up until that day.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because when I arrived in the States at the end of February, my passport was going to expire this year, and so I said, "Well, I'm here for a month. I'll send it off and get it renewed." I use a passport and visa services company that services the music industry in LA. So I sent them my passport and put not a full rush, but a speeded up, amount of expedition on it. So, then it was about waiting for it to come back. So even though I could have canceled that tour probably a week before, and nobody would have been people would have understood, because by that show in Minneapolis, which is March 11th, it was already, people were starting to not show up. They'd buy tickets, but decided not worth the risk going out. And in some cases, people were feeling sick, then they didn't know if it's a cold or the flu or,
right,
fucking whatever, Captain Trips. So I had no choice to carry on until I got my passport back. I had nowhere to go. So I just kept doing the shows, and it got more and more interesting. That last show that I played on March 15th at St. Andrews in Houston, part of their Coffee House Live series. They didn't even have church that day. But the guy running that show is a mensch, and he was like, "You got to let this show happen. This guy's from Europe, and this will be the last one, but you got to let it happen."
Oh, that's great.
And of the 100 or so people who bought tickets, I think maybe 24 people actually came.
Wow.
Well, I mean, it is what it is, and let's just say that I had 75 tickets that might not have, if it had been a walk-up, I wouldn't have had.
That's true.
But people were happy to, they understood, and I did the show, so they're kind of up to them if they don't come. But that actually helped because that was it, live music wise, for some time. Anyway, my passport was ready the next day. I got, basically I got a notification on Sunday from the company saying, "Hey, your passport's going to be ready in LA on Monday. What do you want to do?" And I was like, "Oh, well, I'll check in tomorrow. I'll give you guys a call, and we'll figure out where to send it." I was thinking about going to Austin from there because my original flight was leaving after South by Southwest, so I was going to just try and move it up, but I hadn't figured it out yet. And I woke up Monday morning, the 16th, in Houston, my hotel, with a voice in my head going, "You got to go now." And I was like, "Oh, what? I don't. Whose voice was that? I don't know." It was 7 a.m. I said, "Okay." So I wrote to the passport people saying, "I'm going to come pick it up. So either hold it there or courier it over to my assistant in Burbank. I'll figure it out." I looked up flights online. Houston is United Hub, so I had enough United miles, just enough United miles to get a flight that was leaving in 90 minutes. It was $5.
Perfect.
I got so I hauled ass to the airport, dumped the rental car, flew to LA. I had all my bags. I was planning on playing a Posies show, so I had synth and pedals and all this shit in one suitcase, and I've been hauling all this crap around. I had a guitar, so I had all this crap. Anyway, my wonderful assistant and friend and helper and good pal Tina Dunn came out to LA, handed me the passports. I got a flight right there, on the last flight leaving for Paris,
Hmm.
and got on the plane, and that was that.
That's awesome. So right now you're going to kill me if I don't promote what you're doing right now. So right now you're doing a bunch of production work in your studio.
I'll be fine, and you'll be fine.
No, we'll all be fine.
But yeah, I mean, basically, I do studio stuff. I mean, live music isn't really quite happening yet.
Mm-hmm.
I did a show in Germany in September,
Mm-hmm.
while they had a little window where that was okay, and that was cool. I've been doing some online shows. I will be doing one next month in Rwanda. It'll be a live show in Rwanda, but I'll be doing it also on the web.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have that set up yet, but check in with if you follow me on Instagram at Ken Stringfellow. That'd be the thing to do.
Perfect.
All is there, and my Instagram bio is a link tree that all my upcoming shows are in there when they're up.
So you're actually
in the meantime, I do lots of studio work, just like I'm working here in the studio, in my studio in the Seattle area.
Mm-hmm.
And I have another studio in France. And I'm always, up for projects. So one thing I will say is at this point, I'm planning on coming back to Seattle February, March. And I have some open dates. So if you're in the Seattle area, that's a great thing. You want to come and record as long as it's allowed. Right now things are kind of shutting down, but I'm hoping by February they'll be open again.
So actually,
we're very COVID safe here.
That's actually a good point, though. Are studios part of the shutdown? Like, it's unclear.
Yeah, the only businesses that are allowed to be open technically right now, because we went a step backwards in the last week,
right,
are like hair salons, this kind of thing. Yeah, there's a list on the Open Safe or whatever it's called webpage. So things have, indoor dining is now once again banned.
Mm-hmm.
Outdoor and takeaway is okay. So indoor gatherings are totally banned. Outdoor gatherings are now down to 5 people.
Yeah, well, perfect.
So the weather's turned now. So, but those outdoor yoga classes are probably not really a thing, but still, it's all gone.
I feel bad for all the bars that are open right now, or trying to stay open. Like, outside.
Yeah, they can do takeaway.
Outside bars in Seattle, no.
That's never going to go back in the bottle.
No.
The drinking on the street is here to stay. We are now officially New Orleans.
Well, I don't see anything wrong. Like, most of the world does something similar, so why can't Seattle? Like,
God, I remember like working on a record in Spain. It's completely reckless, and I wouldn't really do this now, but those were the days. I remember riding on the band guy's scooter. I'm like on the back of the scooter, but I've got a 40 ouncer, and I'm just like, look. But yeah, I mean, other countries are a little bit more lax, and they're not depopulated. They haven't, it's not everybody in the country died because kids 18-year-olds can drink wine.
Right. So okay, one last question here. I meant to ask it before. So
that's what they all say.
Yeah, exactly. You're actually going to fly to Rwanda?
Yeah, I mean, as long as I can.
Okay.
And right now I can.
Okay.
There's nothing stopping me.
Are you afraid of being
Rwanda
stuck?
welcomes American tourists, visitors, or whatever. I mean, I'm playing a show, so I'm not really a tourist, but I mean, American visitors. I'm not working per se, as it's a benefit concert. For it'll be for Musicians Without Borders.
That's awesome.
For their work in Rwanda, and the Solar Sister organization,
mm-hmm.
Who do work in many places in Africa, not Rwanda currently. Solar Sister is not something that came from us, even though it shares the name with one of our songs. Solar Sister does wonderful work promoting, shall we say, economic freedom for women.
Oh, okay.
Via
that's great.
Micro solar projects.
Do me a favor, send me a link, and I'll make sure I put it down below everything.
Yeah,
when this is published.
Musicians Without Borders do work in various places around the world. That music is, it's a vital part of life, and helps people in a number of ways, community-wise, education-wise. hope wise,
Mm-hmm.
just positive change wise. And so that they do work in Rwanda. There's a music school they help out there, and I'll be helping that school out, for example.
That's incredible, man. Incredible. But you're not afraid of being stuck there. Like if there's like a lockdown or whatnot, does that even enter your?
You can always return to your home nation.
Yeah.
There's always a way.
No, I guess that's true.
I mean, there's embassy people. There's all kinds of people in Rwanda. Like there wouldn't be no extractions. You'd be able to get back.
Does your wife worry when you take one of these trips, or is she just used to it by now?
I think she's cool.
That's awesome. Hey, Ken, anything else you want to say, man?
Well, anyone who's interested in working with me music production wise can always drop me a line at ken@kenstringfellow.com. Or I really think everybody in the world should follow my Instagram at Ken Stringfellow, and you can always direct message me there.
That's perfect, man.
So yeah,
That's
I
perfect.
hope that we all get through this. I hope we get through this with a minimal loss of life and welfare, and that we come out on the other side of this wiser and more compassionate.
I hope so too, man.
And that live music returns to our way of life at some point. But I do believe that online shows are here to stay, and I think they're really cool. I think that's been a really interesting discovery.
I think so too.
But yeah, I just hope, let's hope things get better after they might get a little worse for a bit.
Probably.
Yeah,
Hey, man.
but we've been through tough stuff.
Yeah, well,
We'll
we have, and I gotta say, man, it's been a lot of fun watching you over like the last 30. I don't even want to say 32 years, 33, however long it's been.
32, yeah.
Yeah. Doing what you're doing, and you keep moving and doing, like shit you did in Senegal and whatever. Like you've been moving and shaking for the last 32 years.
Yeah.
So it's awesome. It's awesome.
100 countries visited,
Perfect.
of which I've done shows in 94 of them.
That's incredible. You need a travel blog. That's what you need.
Oh, I kind of had one for a while. Then I decided to, I'm going to save that for a book.
There you go. Perfect, man. Hey, perfect. Ken, great chatting to you, buddy. I'll talk to you soon, all right? Cheers.
All right, take care.
Thank you.